The house always seemed loudest at night. Not because anything was happening, but because everything I tried to swallow during the day echoed once the sun went down. That evening, the walls felt especially thin, every sound magnified: the clatter of dishes downstairs, my father's footsteps pacing the hallway, the piercing wail of my little sister having yet another tantrum over something small. It had all become so normal that I barely flinched anymore. I'd just gotten home from a long shift at the cafe, still smelling faintly of espresso and vanilla syrup, and all I wanted was a quiet moment alone. But quiet didn't exist in that house. Before I could even sit down, my parents were already calling my name from the hallway, their voices sharp in that way that made my stomach twist. They didn't knock before coming into my attic room. They never did. Privacy wasn't something they believed a child, or, apparently, a grown adult, deserved. My mother crossed her arms, her expression said in a familiar mixture of frustration and superiority, like she had been waiting all day for something to blame on me. My father stood beside her, serious and stiff, the kind of posture he used when he thought he was being authoritative. They didn't waste time easing into the conversation or pretending to care how tired I was. "Lena," my mother began, her tone already lined with disappointment, "we've made a decision." A decision. That was always a bad sign. Whenever they phrased something as a decision, it meant I had no choice in the matter. My father stepped forward, his face unreadable. "You're going to take on full-time caretaking for Mila. After school, weekends, evenings. Everything. It's too much for your mother." The words hit me like cold water. I blinked, certain I'd misunderstood. "I already watch her all the time," I said, my voice small, careful, trying to tread lightly around whatever mood they were in. "No." My mother snapped, as if I had deeply offended her by daring to speak. "You help, but now it's your responsibility. She needs stability. A stability." The word was almost laughable. They wanted stability but refused to give the child boundaries, discipline, or structure. Instead, they poured all their energy into spoiling her and making excuses for her behavior. And when that didn't work, when she became too much for them, they shoved her into my arms and called it help. My father must have seen the objection forming on my face because he cut me off coldly. "If you don't want to cooperate, your rent doubles. Starting tonight." For a moment the air left my lungs. Rent doubling would destroy me. I was already on the edge financially, saving every spare dollar for school. They knew that. They knew exactly what they were doing, exactly how to corner me. All those years of reminding me how lucky I was to live there, how cheap they were letting me stay in the attic, it all clicked into place. This wasn't a request. It was a threat. I stood there in silence as they waited for me to break, to agree out of fear the way I always had. My mother's expression softened into something almost smug when I didn't immediately fight back. "Good," she said, with a finality that made my chest tighten. "We'll start tomorrow. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." They left as quickly as they had come, closing the door behind them. The click of it sounded like the lock on a cage. I sank onto my bed, my hands buried in my hair, and stared at the wall as if it could offer some kind of escape. It was in that still, suffocating silence that the truth sank in fully. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as free labor, a live-in nanny who happened to share their DNA. Every memory of me stepping aside, sacrificing, helping, swallowing my needs because Mila is younger, came rushing back like a lifetime of unpaid debts suddenly tallied. I wasn't a person to them. I was a solution. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't have to be. The first week of being my sister's full-time caregiver felt like aging 10 years in 7 days. It started with small things: early morning wake-ups because Mila refused to get herself dressed, the endless negotiations over breakfast, the tantrums over shoes that didn't feel exciting enough. I told myself it was temporary, that I could endure it until I figured something out. But by the third day, the temporary discomfort had turned into a storm I couldn't escape. Mila's energy was relentless. She wanted everything her way and had learned that screaming was the quickest route to victory. She refused to brush her teeth unless I sang a song she liked. She wouldn't eat unless I cut her food into perfect shapes. She screamed if I didn't watch her every second, accused me of being mean when I tried to set even the tiniest boundary. If I stepped away to use the bathroom, she followed me, pounding at the door like the world was ending. And through it all, my parents acted like her behavior was normal, like it was expected for a child to demand the universe revolve around them. They never saw what happened when they weren't home. They only saw the aftermath. Mila upset, crying, dramatic, and instantly assumed I was the cause. Every conversation ended the same way. "You're older, Lena. Be patient. Don't provoke her." One afternoon, Mila decided she wanted ice cream before dinner. I gently told her no. She threw herself onto the floor, screaming so loudly the neighbor's dogs started barking. When I tried to calm her down, she kicked me in the shin so hard tears sprang to my eyes. I didn't yell. I didn't lose control. I just stepped back, breathed deeply, and waited for her to tire out. But by the time my parents came home, they found her tear-streaked and exhausted in my lap, and somehow the scene looked like I was the villain. "What did you do to her?" my mother demanded. "Why do you always upset her?" "I just told her she couldn't have ice cream," I explained, my voice soft but trembling with exhaustion. "You should have given her a small amount then," my father said. "You know how she gets." How she gets. As if the fact that she turned feral at the faintest disappointment was a natural disaster impossible to prevent. The next day was somehow worse. Mila hurled her backpack across the room because she didn't want to do her homework. The corner hit my mouth, splitting my lip. I tasted blood and felt a sting that went bone deep, not just from the injury but from the realization that no one was going to care. I tried to talk to my parents about it that night, hoping maybe seeing the wound would spark some concern. Instead, they told me I was playing victim. "You bruise too easily," my father said, dismissing the truth without even looking at me properly. "You need thicker skin," my mother added. "You're making everything dramatic." Every sentence was a shovel digging deeper into the hole they expected me to live in. Their expectations were endless, their gratitude non-existent. The breaking point came on a Friday night. Mila had gotten into the art supplies while I was folding laundry and dumped an entire cup of paint onto the living room wall. When I rushed over to stop her, she threw the cup at me, splattering my shirt. I'd barely cleaned up half the mess before my parents walked in. They took one look at the painted wall and turned on me like wolves. "Lena," my father roared. "You had own job." My mother's voice cut through me like glass. "If you don't want more rent increases, you need to stop creating problems. You need to take responsibility for your failures." Failures. That word broke something I had spent years trying to hold together. I went to my room without arguing, closed the door quietly, and sat on the floor. My hands trembled, but my mind was strangely still. The house felt unfamiliar, like I was seeing it for the first time. Every wall was a reminder of the way I had been trained to serve, obey, and sacrifice, and suddenly, I knew with perfect clarity that I couldn't survive another week like this. I stood slowly, walked to my closet, and pulled out a duffel bag. I didn't need everything. I didn't want everything. I packed only the essentials: clothes, my charger, my ID, my little sketchbook. Things I would need to live, not to stay. As I zipped the bag shut, a quiet certainty washed over me. I wasn't running away. I was finally running toward something, a life where I wasn't someone's unpaid nanny, someone's scapegoat, someone's afterthought, a life of my own. I left before the sun even considered rising, the sky still a deep blue that made the world feel quiet and suspended. My footsteps on the driveway sounded louder than usual, like the universe was acknowledging what I was doing, even if no one else ever would. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't want to see the window of the room where I had cried myself to sleep, or the door my parents never bothered knocking on, or the walls that had absorbed every ounce of exhaustion I'd poured into them. I walked with only the essentials in my bag and the certainty that if I stayed even one more day, I would break. My friend Lacey lived 2 towns away, in a cramped apartment above a nail salon. I'd texted her the night before, asking if I could crash on her couch for few days. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need explanations. When I stepped into her apartment, she wrapped me in a hug that made the emotions I'd been suppressing almost spill over. She didn't comment on my puffy eyes or the tired slump of my shoulders. She just handed me a blanket and said, "Stay as long as you need." The first day felt unreal. I kept expecting my phone to explode with texts, calls, threats, but nothing came. It wasn't until late afternoon that the messages started appearing. First, a single word from my mother: "Where?" Then, "You better not be pulling some stunt, answer us." Then from my father, "Come home now, we need to talk." I blocked the numbers without opening the messages. My hands shook, but when the screen went dark, I felt lighter. For the first time in years, my time was mine. No babysitting, no screaming, no walking on eggshells. I could breathe without waiting for someone to demand something of me. The second day, I woke early expecting noise, expecting Mila's shrill voice or my mother yelling up the stairs. Instead, the apartment was silent, save for the hum of the fridge and the muffled drone of the salon downstairs. Silence felt almost foreign, luxurious. I made coffee at Lacey's tiny kitchen counter and drank it without interruption, no tantrums, no sudden crisis. It felt like I'd stepped into someone else's life. But my parents' panic escalated quickly. Mutual friends started messaging me screenshots of frantic posts from my mother online. Vague, dramatic ones about daughter who abandoned her family, and pleas for me to do the right thing. I ignored every single one. By day 3, the true chaos set in. A friend who lived on our street told me that the first morning I didn't come downstairs, Mila had refused to get out of bed. When my mother tried to dress her, she screamed so loudly a neighbor knocked to ask if everything was okay. Mila refused breakfast, then demanded waffles, then threw the waffles at the wall when they weren't crunchy enough. Without me there as the buffer, the anchor, the distraction, her behavior spiraled in every direction. Babysitters came and went. One quit after 2 hours when Mila bit her hard enough to leave a bruise. Another left after Mila locked herself in the bathroom and refused to come out for nearly an hour, screaming that she wanted Lena, not these stupid people. My parents called out of work. They called relatives to help. Nobody lasted. Meanwhile, I was beginning to stitch myself back together. Lacey and I cooked cheap pasta dishes, watched terrible reality TV, and I worked extra cafe shifts to earn money fast. Every day away from that house felt like adding another brick to a foundation I never believed I'd get to build. But my parents didn't slow down. When the calls couldn't reach me, they sent emails, long, dramatic paragraphs filled with accusations and guilt trips. You're being selfish. Your sister needs you. You have responsibilities to this family. This is your home. Come back and fix what you've caused. Reading them felt like stepping back into a nightmare. I never replied. When the guilt tactics didn't work, they tried anger. How dare you walk out like a child? You're ruining our lives. We took care of you for years, and this is how you repay us. And when anger didn't work, they tried desperation. Please, we can't control her. She won't listen to us. Come home even just for a few days. Please, Lena. But I was done. Their panic wasn't my problem. Their choices weren't my consequences. For the first time, the chaos they had always placed on me was finally in their hands. And I wasn't going to take it back. As I sat on Lacey's couch, sipping tea in the peaceful glow of her living room lamp, I realized something important. Maybe they would never understand what they did to me. Maybe they would never apologize, never change, never see me as anything more than someone to use. But I had changed. I was gone, and I wasn't going back. 2 months after I left, the world felt different. Quieter, brighter, wider. I had fallen into a rhythm at Lacey's place. Wake up early, take the bus to the cafe, work an extra shift, come home exhausted but oddly content. Every day I put a little money aside, and every day the life I dreamed of felt more possible. Freedom wasn't glamorous. It was ramen dinners and secondhand clothes and a mattress on the floor. But it was mine, and that made it beautiful. When I finally had enough saved for a deposit, I rented a tiny studio apartment. It wasn't much, just a single room with a kitchenette, one window, and the smallest bathroom I'd ever seen. But when I turned the key, my chest tightened with a feeling I'd never known before. The faint smell of fresh paint, the emptiness waiting to be filled, the silence humming like a lullaby, it felt like walking into my future. I slept on blankets the first night, staring up at the ceiling, unable to believe that no one could come bursting through the door demanding something. No screaming child. No criticism. No guilt loud enough to swallow me whole. Just me and the quiet. My parents didn't know where I lived, but they hadn't stopped trying to contact me. They'd been escalating for weeks. The emails had shifted through every stage of manipulation. Anger, guilt, accusations, silence, then back to anger again. But I didn't answer. I had spent years being the one to fix everything. The one who apologized, who smoothed over, who carried more than I could bear. I wasn't doing that anymore. Then one evening, as I arranged my thrift store dishes into the cabinet, a new email arrived. The subject line was simply, "We're sorry, please read." For a moment, I considered deleting it without opening. But something in me, curiosity, closure, or maybe just the desire to finally hear them acknowledge reality, made me click. The email was longer than anything they had ever written to me. My mother's words were shaky, hesitant, and far more emotional than I expected. She said they hadn't realized how much they depended on me. She said they were overwhelmed. That they missed me. That they shouldn't have pressured me the way they did. My father added a short note at the bottom, less emotional but unexpectedly honest. "We didn't handle things well. "We need your help, but we want to talk." They asked me to come home. "Just for a little while," they said. "Just until things calm down." As if a temporary stay would erase years of using me as a buffer, a babysitter, a piece of furniture they could move around whenever life became inconvenient. I stared at the screen for a long time, not angry but unbelievably tired. Tired of being needed only when things fell apart. Tired of being expected to sacrifice while no one else lifted a finger. Tired of their sudden realization, which wasn't about love, it was about desperation. I opened a blank reply. My fingers shook, not from fear but from the weight of choosing myself. I wrote slowly, carefully. "I'm glad you're realizing how much I did for the family. But I'm not coming back, not temporarily, not ever. I'm not your nanny. I'm not your backup plan. I'm your daughter, and you lost my presence when you treated me like labor instead of family. I'm safe, I'm okay, and I'm building a life I can be proud of. Please respect my boundaries. Do not contact me unless it's a real emergency." When I hit send, it felt like releasing a breath I'd been holding for years. The days that followed were quiet. They stopped emailing, they stopped calling, and I didn't check on them. I didn't ask mutual friends how they were doing. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening. My parents were dealing with the same chaos they'd always dumped onto me. Mila's tantrums, her wildness, the consequences of raising a child without boundaries or accountability. All of it was finally theirs to handle. And while they struggled, I was thriving in the tiniest, gentlest ways. I enrolled in a graphic design program. I set up a small desk in my studio and sketched every night. I decorated my walls with prints I made myself. I made new friends at work. I learned how to cook things that didn't come from a box. My life was simple, but it was mine. Sometimes revenge isn't a dramatic confrontation or a triumphant speech. Sometimes revenge is quietly walking away and letting people suffer the consequences of their own choices. My absence wasn't an act of cruelty. It was the simple, inevitable result of years of being taken for granted. They thought they could control me with rent. They thought I would break under pressure. They thought I was trapped. But I wasn't. I had only ever been waiting for the moment I realized I deserved better. And once I knew that, nothing could keep me in that house. The sweetest revenge wasn't watching them fall apart. It was finally giving myself the life they never let me have.